started, and people can join as we go. It's riveting content, so I'm eager to jump right in.
Sure. Well, I'll do a quick introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us for another Pep Talks. If you haven't been here before, I'm Justine, the Grand Vice President for Collegiates, and we're really happy for you to join us again for our usual Saturday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time Pep Talks to kind of review different chapter, important things going on in your chapter. So today we are joined by the very fabulous and wonderful Joan Rogala, who's our LKS principal, and she is here to talk to us about risk management when it comes to your chapters and potential ways that we can try to mitigate risk among the chapters. So it'll be interactive, and so look forward to your participation. So we will record this and send out things afterwards as well, so you can share with your chapters too. So take it away, Joan.
Great. Justine, thank you so much. And I'm hoping too that you can kind of monitor the chat function for any questions that come along. Please, throughout the program, enter them there. Justine, interrupt me if there are questions. I think that's the best way to engage in this conversation, because there's a lot of interesting content, some not so interesting, but it's important. So we'll get through as much as we can today, and it can be an ongoing conversation as well. Okay. So my name is Joan Rogala. I have been working with LKS for over 25 years. It's been a wonderful time with all of you, and I've also worked with some other professional Greek organizations. And the topic of risk management is an important one, so that everyone just has a base understanding. It's during this time of COVID, it may not seem like it's as relevant, but I am very hopeful that as things are getting ready to change with getting back to campuses after we get a vaccine and things like that, that we'll begin to start planning a lot of events, a lot of engagements, and that's where this is really going to kick in. So let's start with just what the rationale of risk management is. We're really just trying to provide a framework and some guidelines so that you know what risk management is. A lot of times people say, oh, we have insurance, so that's our risk management. And it's a little bit more than that. We're really trying to establish some guidelines. That's unfortunate. Okay, so I just lost my screen with all I'm very sorry about that.
Joan, I would try to maybe unshare and then try to reshare like we were doing before.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure running to the front. Sorry about that, you guys. Yes. Okay. Not the guru on the equipment here. Okay. So we're trying to establish some guidelines to help you make great decisions in the risk management space. So the components of a risk management program include, first of all, who are we, our identity. We really have to have a strong understanding of who we are as LKS members and as pharmacists and as professionals. Once we identify ourselves within that framework, the rest of it kind of falls in place. There's also some rules. We got to follow rules. There are many, many resources available to you. We have a really great assessment tool to assess risk. And then there's also, in the unfortunate circumstance of something bad happening, we also need to have a crisis management plan. And then the very last thing on the list is insurance. Insurance is there if we've done all of the things, the first 5 things, if we've really understood that and applied it very consistently. Insurance is there kind of at the bottom to support us. Have we done everything the way it's supposed to be done? It's there in the event that something bad happens anyway. It's there to protect the organization and its members and leaders. Okay, so let's talk very briefly about who we are, because we have to have a context of what type of risk we're talking about. First of all, LKS is professional. We're not a social Greek organization, we're a professional Greek organization, so that should really direct kind of a thought process around the activities that we plan. We also have a mission statement, a creed, we have core values, and we also have our history, our legacy. What do we want to preserve so that the organization's reputation is preserved for those who have come before us, but also for those who are going to come after us. So we really have to make sure that all of our members, through the orientation process and all of our programs and activities, to understand who we are in the context of how we all came together to do professional programming to elevate women in pharmacy. We have adopted a creed, we have our core values, and we really have a rich, over 100-year legacy of an organization that has been well known and very highly regarded on our college campuses. So let's talk about the rules. I have a picture here of a hot cup of coffee. It's on a Saturday morning. That just seemed to be a great way to start this conversation about the rules. Okay, so there's nothing better than a wonderful hot cup of coffee, but I want you to imagine if you took the pot of coffee and you just started pouring it and you didn't have a cup. That wonderful, rich, fantastic cup of coffee now would be a mess, and it would also be painful. It could burn you. It could make what would be a pleasant experience, it could turn it into a very unpleasant experience. So that wonderful cup of coffee has to have a cup to contain it so that you can then really enjoy it. I want you to consider the rules of risk management that need to be followed as the cup. As long as you're doing those wonderful LKS activities, you know, that cup of coffee, the things you love so much, within the context of the cup, that you're following the rules, the federal, state, local, and campus laws, the policies of your campus and your fraternity, and even the code of conduct of Lambda Kappa Sigma, you'll note that you're operating within the context of the rules, that cup that will contain everything wonderful about LKS without it being a mess and without it hurting somebody. So I really kind of like to look at the rules as the cup, and everything wonderful we do in PSC is in LKS is in that cup. Okay. So now let's look at what we put in our cup of coffee. Okay, we like to add some sweetener, maybe some cream and some wonderful things, so that what is really great about our organization actually has some additional things that give it flavor and make it very enjoyable. For us to do that in the context of risk management, we need to look at the resources available to us. We have campus resources, that'd be the Office of Student Life, the Student Activities Office, our advisors and an advisory committee on campus. We also have our headquarters, we have our region supervisors, the GVP of collegiates, and our headquarters staff. I'm going to step away for just 1 minute and I will be right back with you. I got to turn something off real quick. Sorry about that, I had a space heater on and it was cooking me. Okay, so our campus resources, our headquarters resources, and also the insurance company that we use for LKS, JR Favor, all of them have great resources to help you in the risk management planning process and to understand the context of all of this. So you've got a lot of great resources. We have some on the LKS website that you should check out. So lots of great resources available to you as you're looking at this topic. Okay. We also have an assessment tool. So if we're keeping with the context of this coffee, the assessment tool really takes all the different ways that you could plan LKS activities and events and programs, fundraisers and engagements and socials. You can mix things up in so many different ways that you're not going to be able to apply one single thought process to the risk management program. You're going to actually have to look at all the different ways that the pieces mix together so that you can assess the risks and you can identify a strategy to make sure that you keep yourselves and your member, the chapter, and the fraternity safe, because that's what's the most important here, is just making sure everyone is safe in the context of their activities with LKS. So the risk assessment tool is actually all the different ways that we mix things together and how we can help to identify risks so that we can make sure that our members are safe. Okay, So then how do we go about assessing risk? Okay, risk in the context of Lambda Kappa Sigma as a professional organization for women in pharmacy, you see how I'm putting it in context. Within the context of who we are, let's identify what type of risks could be present in the activities that we have. There could be risks of hazing, and a lot of times this comes from things that the chapters consider to be our great, our history and our legacy and our traditions. You really need to look at those with a critical eye to see, is this just a tradition, or could this be in some way interpreted as hazing? There's also event risk. This is if we're planning a program, a social event, and all of the things that might come into it. Are we going away? Are we going off campus? Are we serving alcohol? Are there going to be guests at the events that are not members of the organization? The events have a lot of pieces that are going to be mixed into the great, the LKS experience. So we want to make sure that those events are very well planned out, and we apply all the available resources to make sure that those events are enjoyable and safe. The other type of risks are alcohol and controlled substances, automobiles and transportation if we're driving members or prospective members to or from an event. A lot of times we're asked to sign contracts. If we want to do a fundraiser, or if we want to do something with the campus, sometimes we'll be asked to sign a contract which legally binds us to a commitment. Sometimes you may need to have those contracts reviewed by someone else to make sure that you're not putting yourselves personally, the chapter, or the fraternity at risk for the contractual obligations that you've signed off on. Finally, there are, the potential risk sources related to sexual harassment, abuse, misconduct, or discrimination. These are some things that have probably more frequently come out in co-ed organizations, but they certainly exist. They exist everywhere. And we do have to keep a trained eye to that in all that we're doing in LKS as well. Okay, so these are the different types of potential risks that are possible within the context of the Lambda Kappa Sigma chapter. Okay, so here's what the tool looks like, and it really is kind of a function of the impact of something bad happening versus the probability of something bad happening and how that measures on this grid. So let's take an example of what impact could be. Let's take an event where we're going to be, it's a celebratory event, and we want to have, we want to serve cocktails at the event. And we're going to have all of our members join us. There may be some who are underage. There may be some who are of drinking age. We may have some alumni, but we want to have a great event. We want to celebrate possibly the end of the year or some major milestone for the chapter. So when you're looking at an event that includes alcohol, the first thing you have to consider then is the impact of if something bad happens. For example, somebody is overserved, they leave the event, they get into a car accident, and they are hospitalized. So somebody is injured from the result of our event. Okay, the impact, especially because in the context of LKS, we are Greek letter organization. That doesn't mean that LKS, being professional and all the wonderful things we do, really stands out. What's going to stand out is our Greek letter affiliation, okay? So the impact of this, should it happen, first of all, it's a horrible impact because it hurts somebody we care about. That's the first and highest impact, is somebody got hurt, and we don't want that to happen. The other impact could be that it could really damage the organization and the leadership involved. So the impact of this happening would be extremely high. I would call it a 5 on this chart. The impact of something bad would be a 5. The probability of this happening also, if we're serving alcohol, and we know that people are going to be leaving afterward, the probability of something bad happening could also be pretty high. You may even say it could be medium if you have some things in place that, that help to mitigate that risk. But in and of itself, the event with no risk mitigation, the likelihood and probability of something bad happen is also high. So if you look across this grid, high impact, high probability, you're in the red zone. The red zone means it's not a good idea to do this event. It's just a really bad idea. High impact, high probability. Anything in that red zone are things you should absolutely rethink or consider what your strategy is going to be. So I'm going to move away from this slide, and we're going to talk about the different types of strategy you can apply as you're planning these events. Okay. So if in the example that I gave you, the probability is high and the impact is high, that's something to avoid, okay? So I would say, you know, as your principal, as working with your organization and your chapter, I would say do not do this event. This is not, it doesn't fall within the rules, first of all, of the state. You may have underage drinkers, so you're not following the laws. You're not following the policy of the school. You're not following the policy of the fraternity. It's a high risk, high probability. Avoid it at all costs, okay? But that doesn't mean you can't have fun. So let's talk about what the other options are when we look at managing risk. You could transfer the risk. This is the beginning of how you're thinking everything through. You could transfer the risk. And the way you transfer risk is it would bring it down to a medium on the scale. I'm going to go back. If we transfer the risk, we're actually going to try to get it in that medium range, okay? So transferring the risk could mean finding a third-party vendor, okay, who would serve only those individuals who are of drinking age. That means they would be checking IDs. That means that they would not overserve. That means that the third-party vendor would actually take on the risk of the part that is the most difficult to manage on our own, okay? So you can transfer the risk to a third-party vendor. You still have to keep in mind what the rules are to make sure it falls within the context. Is that even allowed by your school, by your organization, by the chapter, by the fraternity? But sometimes there are events that you can transfer risk and move them to a third-party vendor, okay? You can also mitigate risk. So you can take an entire event, and this is how I have worked with LKS chapters when an event like this has been proposed. I talk to them about mitigating the risks. So in all the things we talked about, you want to have this big celebration. The first thing I say is remove alcohol from the picture 100%. Because you have underage members, it's not fair to have an event that has alcohol plus all of the risk exposures. So to really mitigate that risk, the first thing I say is change the event. Make it a taste of, you know, Toledo. If you're a chapter in Toledo, make it a taste of event, and you have all different vendors come in and provide different types of food. Make it a tasting of some kind of different desserts. Have a different way of doing the same event, but just pulling out the risk. The risk is the alcohol. The risk is the rules not being followed. The risk is underage individuals that are part of the chapter not being able to participate. So look at how can I revise this event, turning into something wonderful without there being so many risk factors available to it, okay? The final thing is if you go back to, let me go back. Okay, so now let's go to the low. Like if we change this celebratory event from an event where alcohol is served to one where it's a food event, and we invite faculty and you know, people that are friends, and we can actually bring this down to such a low level of risk that it's something where we have gone through the whole process of planning. We've lowered the impact because, you know, heaven forbid if somebody still gets in a car accident after eating cheesecake, it's still a terrible thing. It's still, we don't want anything bad to happen to our members at all. But the likelihood of that happening after they have a piece of cheesecake as opposed to several drinks is very low. Also, the impact of that on the individual, their family, the chapter, the advisors, the leaders, the impact would be, hey, you guys planned a wonderful event, and this was clearly just an accident. It's not something that was, I am so sorry, my screen keeps Bump it. I'm not sure if you guys can still see this.
No, it's just a white screen right now. Oh, there you go.
Are we back? Okay. Very cool. So in the event of that same event being taken to a food event or a dessert event, then the individuals, if an accident happens, you know, the impact on the organization is very low because you didn't plan something knowing that it was going to be risky. The probability then of it happening, of having a food event or a dessert event, the probability of something happening is much greater reduced because the likelihood of something bad happening that you could anticipate and control is much lower. So then you move into that green section of the risk assessment tool, and you realize that this event is clearly something that, to the best of our ability, we have planned it in a way that will keep our members safe, engaged, and still have the celebratory or fun event that we're looking for. Okay? So I want to just pause for a moment, and Justine, I don't know if there are any questions in the chat yet, or if you have any questions at all. I can talk up to 100 words a second, so.
There are no questions right now.
Okay, great.
But if you guys have questions, you can throw them into the chat if you have any questions right now.
That would be great. Thank you, Justine. So this tool is kind of key in turning you into, instead of just giving you a list of do's and don'ts for you can do this, you can't do that, you can't. I don't like talking to educated professional women with a laundry list of do's and don'ts. To me, that doesn't teach you about thinking and planning. It just gives you a list of do's and don'ts that really don't have a lot of depth to them. When it comes to risk management, you really need to be thinkers. You are the leadership of the organization, you are the leaders of the chapter and of the fraternity, and you need to really think things through and develop a keen sense of understanding how to identify risk and how to mitigate it. And if you're looking at an event that has, like, if something bad happens, there's a high impact and there's a much increased likelihood that something bad could happen, you as the decision makers and leaders need to put your foot down and say, absolutely not. We cannot do this event in the format that it currently exists. But let's think about how we could still have the same type of a wonderful celebratory event or fundraiser in a way that lowers the impact and the exposure of our members to being harmed, and it lowers the probability that anything bad would happen. You never can guarantee it, but you certainly can lower the probability of it, okay? So I'd really love to see your chapters using this tool to think through all of the different things that you do as a chapter so that you can really get good at problem solving and working together as a team to learn to identify the risk and then learn how to mitigate it. So the different strategies as we've gone through, once we identify the risk, we can avoid it altogether if it's high. We can transfer or manage that risk by trying to make some changes to the event. And if the risk and impact are low, just accept whatever low amount of risk there is. There's always some, no matter what you do. If you walk out the door, there's risk. So if it's a low enough risk, you've gone through the process of thinking it through, and then you can accept it and move forward with the best possible plan that you can have. Okay. So when you're looking at events in your chapter, this is kind of a hit list about how we as chapter leaders and fraternity leaders can really manage the risk. Okay, so for each project or activity, any events that you have, here's kind of a little checklist. Does it support the mission, creed, and core values of LKS? Does it do that? If it doesn't, you may not even, like, it may not be something you should even be doing. If it doesn't support who we are and what we stand for and what we believe in and all of that, then it really might not be an event that we want to even do. The second thing is, what are the relevant rules and guidelines that need to be followed? Are there laws? Do we need to get a permission from the campus? Does the national organization need to approve the event? Is there some guideline? And you need to know what those guidelines are. Not knowing them is not an excuse for breaking a law or for breaking one of the policies of your school or the organization. So what are the relevant rules and guidelines that you need to follow? Then you go through that process of identifying the risk. Is this hazing risk? Is this alcohol risk? Is this automobile usage risk? What are all of the different types of risk? And try to identify them for your event. Then you apply the risk assessment tool. Is it high probability? Is it high impact? And if so, then how can we mitigate that or avoid it altogether? Okay. Now you need to then communicate effectively to your members, because they're going to be like, hey, why can't we have our dates come? Why can't we have an open bar? And why, I know those are all things that if you're of legal drinking age, the members constantly will come back to you and say, well, why can't we? Why can't we? So you need to walk them through the decision-making process, effectively communicating with them your decision tree, and share with them the risk assessment tool and how you came to the understanding of how this event was going to be planned. If you can effectively communicate with them, it's like, as LKS, in the context of the fraternity, these are the things that we stand for, and our event didn't fall within the scope of that. Further, we have, a high probability and a high impact of risk by having an event that's open bar, and it doesn't follow any of the rules, so we're gonna get in trouble and we could lose our standing, we could put our members at risk. I think effectively communicating a well thought out process really helps you to have those difficult conversations with your chapter when they are wanting what they want when they want it. You're framing it for them that within the context of LKS, that a different kind of event would be more appropriate. And I think you'll get some support behind that if they realize that you haven't just imposed a list of do's and don'ts on them, but you've actually had a real thought process and problem-solving process that will assure their safety and the integrity of the organization. Finally, and this is very important, a lot of times we'll go through the planning process and we'll come up with the right plan that's going to keep risk at a minimum, but then we deviate from the plan. Okay, so the key is when you plan an event, when you plan something that you would like to do as an LKS chapter, stick with the plan. Do it exactly as you planned it out, with how it's going to be advertised, how you're going to pay for it, how you're going to keep members safe, what you're going to serve, when it starts, when it ends, how you're going to get there, how you're going to get everybody back. All of those pieces in the plan need to be followed very, very specifically. If the plan changes, if any element of the plan changes, the schedule, the timing, the transportation, you need to go through the entire risk assessment again with new information. So don't think because your event is approved and then you start, oh, we just had to change a little bit. Don't change it. Or if you do change it, then you need to go through the risk assessment again, given the new information. So when we get those event planning forms from the chapters and we say this, we never say it's approved because we don't approve your events, but we tell you this either falls within the scope of the fraternity's risk management policy, or it does not fall within the scope of the risk management policy, and here are the suggested changes. At that point, if we say it falls within the scope, that means the information you gave us is how the event should be delivered. If anything changes, you resubmit the form and you provide that additional information, and then we'll guide you again. Does it fall within the scope of our risk management policy? Those are important things to do, because if you create a plan and deviate from it, then you've now put yourself back at risk because you didn't stick with what everyone knows to be the plan for the event. Okay.
Joan, I have a quick question.
Yes.
And maybe you can talk a little bit more. So my understanding, this is kind of like a personal question going back from, my understanding in school and things like that. And maybe this is a question that some other chapter members are having right now. So everything that you're saying as far as risk goes, these are for planning events like a social, a formal, things like this. What about the less formal things? Say a handful of members are gathering just to have drinks in someone's home. Like, where does that line cross? Is it just a formality of like of planning something versus just like sending out a text message to some people? Is it the invitations? Like, where does that line cross?
Okay, that's a fantastic question, and this actually I had this conversation earlier this week, so it's very, very fresh in mind when I worked with a group of students who actually had a group of 4 members. This was not LKS, by the way. A group of 4 members had just gone through their virtual initiation, and then they wanted to go and celebrate by having Friendsgiving at somebody's home, because it was the day before Thanksgiving. And they still had their pin on. They still were high on like, oh, this is so great, and we're so proud to be members of this organization. And then somebody took a private Snapchat story. They did a video. And in the video, they kind of got everybody smiling and, with their drinks and their pin on. And in the background were like, I counted over 8 bottles of liquor on the counter. Now, let me tell you, they weren't wasted. They weren't at all. They were having Friendsgiving. I love Friendsgiving. But the issue is the appearance of, could this be considered a fraternity event? By the appearances. So it doesn't matter if they said, well, no, it was just a few friends getting together. But I actually saw the video. They didn't know. It's like, well, it's a private video on my Snapchat. It's like, yeah, but somebody shared it with me and now it's not private anymore. And the issue wasn't the video, please know, has nothing to do with the video. It has to do with the event. The event had the appearance of being a fraternity or a chapter event because the members were gathered talking about the organization and their membership in it. They were wearing their insignia, whether that's your letters, whether that's your membership pin. And so to a general individual, if they saw the video and you were talking about the fraternity and you were wearing your fraternity insignia, if a reasonable individual would say, that looks like a chapter event, it would in fact be considered a chapter event. So it's the appearance. You need to make sure that you're very careful about the appearance of the event and the context of how people are getting together. And it's what any reasonable outsider would determine to be. And there were a number of people who saw that video and they're like, oh, they're not supposed to drink, and look, they're having this party after initiation and they're all drinking. Okay,
and
so
that stays the same for people who like share a house together as well. I know there's a lot of sisters that share a home together.
I think they're at home and it's just them, enjoying the camaraderie of being roommates. I don't think from my experience that the appearance would be that's a fraternity event if they're not wearing their letters and their pin. And so if it's just 2 friends in their home, that is a private event. But if you look around and you can identify 20 people in the room and all 20 of them are members of the chapter, that's a fraternity event. If there was an invitation, a text message, hey everybody, come on over, and that invitation list is all members of the organization or the majority, that's a fraternity event. Okay, so we're not talking about the facts of it, we're talking about the appearance of it. And that's where a lot of people are like, oh, we just won't videotape it. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about a video. We're talking about actually having that kind of event, okay? Video or no video. We're not just trying to hide it, okay? Please know that hiding it doesn't make it okay, okay?
Thank you.
That just happened very shortly ago. Okay, so I'm going to flip to the next slide. So we have a couple of scenarios. Well, I think we can go through one, and I will share these slides with anyone who is interested. so that we can even post them on the LKS website, because I think this whole presentation, you can go through it pretty quickly. It's you know, the subject matter isn't everyone's favorite, but I like the scenarios. The scenarios actually start to train you as thinkers in the space of risk management. So I'm going to kind of walk through this first scenario, and we together are going to, we're a chapter, and we're a group of chapter officers, okay? And we're going to go through this scenario together, and we're going to assess the risks. So let's look at this first scenario, okay? The chapter supports a local charity that provides food, shelter, and personal items for the homeless in your area. During a chapter brainstorming session, the group comes up with the idea to host a citywide 5K run walk with all proceeds from the event to support the local charity. It is hoped that some local businesses will sponsor the event, and a local news station has been contacted to cover the event, okay? So I think this is kind of cool, and I think we as a chapter come up with the best idea ever. Okay, so let's walk through the risk management assessment. And I would appreciate, Justine, if you would watch the chat, because I'd love for the participants to start putting their responses in the chat. So the first question that you need to evaluate in assessing risk is, does this event, as stated, support the mission, the creed, and the core values of Lambda Kappa Sigma? So just put your responses in the chat, and Justine, just kind of let us know as those are coming in.
I could sing Jeopardy music, but I won't.
Okay, so do you guys think that it supports our creed, mission, and values? I'm hoping you're seeing a few yeses in there.
We got an I think so, two I think so, yes because it's helping others from Marissa, yes from Ginger, so seems like it's a yes.
Okay, good. I'm glad you think it is, because this would be something I would be very proud to see an LKS chapter do. And I think, you know, the response that it serves others. As pharmacists, you serve, and that's the context of why you're even in the profession you're in. So serving others is a really great way to support the mission, creed, and values. So the next question then, what are the relevant rules that you need to consider if you want to plan this event? Like if I were saying, okay guys, we're going to plan this 5K run, you know, Justine, you need to go check on the rules, make sure that we, you know, figure out all the different things we need to do to make sure it's legal and all of that. What would be some of the relevant things you think you would have to look into to make sure that you're following the rules?
I added social distancing.
Well, there you go, especially today, right? Big one.
Morgan said, is the 5K going to be on main roads where traffic will be impaired, and who needs to know about this? So probably, do you need police officers involved?
Yes, that's fantastic. And interestingly enough, if you're mitigating risk, having it on a city street versus on campus or on the track at the you know, compound where they do all the sports, which I never visited on college campuses, we could do it on the track, and then you could really mitigate risk there. But if you're going to have it in the city, who should you be talking to? Somebody you should probably reach out to if you're going to plan it on city streets. That'd probably be the city organizer, the police department, to look and see if there's any type of you'd have to get any permissions or some type of something that gives you permission to have that event, because you might need to have police to escort you if you're going to be using, you know, crosswalks if it's going to be really big. Okay, so there are state, local, campus, and fraternity laws and policies you need to look at to make sure that you're following all of the rules. We actually have done the Hope Walks event for the fraternity for a number of years, and we found out, you know, through trial and error, all of the different things that you have to do to have it on city streets, okay? So then identify all the risks involved with this event. Tell me all the possible things that could go wrong. Just start throwing them in the chat. What could possibly go wrong in a 5K walk? What possibly could happen?
Someone falls and gets injured. You need medical staff on hand. Injuries, someone can fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very good. Those are all good possible risks. Plus, you're opening it up to the public, right? Okay. Can you control the public? Nope. You have no control over the public. Okay. So you might want to start looking at is like, is it going to be like a completely public event? Are we going to keep it to on campus and keep it to students on campus? Like, what is the scope of the event that we have the ability to control so that we can make sure that everyone stays safe, right? We're trying to keep everyone safe. We're trying to mitigate risk. Okay, so look at what are the possible risks. Somebody getting hurt, maybe somebody getting out of control, maybe cars not being stopped so that people can pass. You know, there's a lot of different things that you need to think of, and this one is big, so there's a lot to think about. Okay, but you have the right idea. You're starting to identify those risks. So using the risk assessment tool, rate the risks on the scale of impact versus likelihood. So if we're going to do this event, if something bad happens, what is the impact of that? Remember, we have a news crew coming to make sure this is publicized. What is the impact of something bad happening? Would you rate that a 1 to a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 on the impact scale? A fraternity is having a big citywide event and the news crew is there. Something bad happens.
You got a 4 or 5, or not, as they said, not a good look from Katie, a 5 from Deanna, 4 to 5 from Morgan.
Great.
So seems like a pretty high impact.
So I agree, very high impact. Okay, so then let's look at the likelihood of something bad happens, depending upon the time of day, and like you're doing it on a Saturday morning at the campus on the track, what would be the likelihood of something bad happening there? Probably pretty low, right? Because you're not on city streets, you're probably not going to have a lot of public. If you're doing it on city streets on a Wednesday at noon, at lunchtime, high traffic, high volume. So see how there are all different ways to dial in high to low impact and high to low probability. And as you dial all of that in, you kind of land in that green space where this is very low impact, very low probability that anything bad is going to happen. And if something does, what are we going to do? We're going to have medical professionals on call. We're going to have campus police knowing what we're doing so that if something bad happens, we have the support we need. We're going to register people in advance. They're going to have their names. They're going to have to let us know if they have any health conditions. They're going to have to let us know if there's something that could affect them if they participate in our event. So what we're doing is we're taking this great idea, we're looking at it through the lens of risk and assessing that risk. We're looking at ways that we can still do this really great thing to support our mission, core values, and creed of the organization and this wonderful charity. And we're finding a way to do it all within the context of low risk and the low probability of something bad happening. Now we've got the news crew there. We've got a way to really make LKS shine because it was a beautiful day. It was a well-organized event. We had plenty of water there for the participants. We made it fun and festive, and we've served this wonderful charity, okay? So everything you're doing through this process is just saying, let's take something really big and kind of out of control, and we're bringing it in with making sure that we follow the policies and guidelines to make it safe for the participants. I'd like to do, I have 3, but I'm just gonna do 1 more. Okay, this one's fun, and this one happens a lot. So let's talk about this one. The long anticipated spring formal has been planned at a local hotel. This members only event includes a meal, a cash bar with 2 drink tickets per member of legal drinking age, and a chapter awards and recognition program followed by music and dancing. Since the chapter had several successful fundraisers over the year, the cost of the event is being paid for in part with chapter funds. A campus group message is posted to social media inviting non-fraternity friends to join the fun after the official program has ended. Okay, so that's the scenario. This is very common, not only in LKS, but in many organizations. This exact scenario comes up every semester when you're getting to the end of the year and you want to have either a Christmas formal or end of the year formal. This is a very prominent thing. So let's talk about the first question to ask. Does this event support the mission, creed, and core values of the fraternity? We're celebrating. It's been a great year. We're together. We're going to celebrate a fantastic LKS year. Does it support our mission, creed, and core values? I would hope you'd say yes, because I think being able to recognize and celebrate should be a big part of our sisterhood. Okay,
Right.
Don't be afraid of these events. Okay,
Yes, Joan, so far.
very cool. Good. So then relevant rules to be considered. Okay, what are some of the rules that are gonna need to be addressed here? Does the school allow you to go off campus and have an event where alcohol is served? What is the fraternity's policy on, that event planning form? You're gonna have to fill that out. You have to submit that. How many days in advance? About 30 days in advance, ideally, so that we can work you through the contracts and all of the planning.
Good job,
Okay.
Deanna got that in the chat. We just have to shout it out for Deanna.
So lots of rules that need to be considered. Of course, you need to follow the rules. No underage, that's a law. That's not a rule, that's a law. You need to make sure that no one underage is getting those drink tickets. Okay. So tell me about some of the lists. And I put Easter eggs all over this scenario of risks that should be red flags. As I was reading it, you should have had about 4 red flags pop up immediately. Anybody seen your red flags pop up? Come on.
Oh, we got non-fraternity members, sisters giving tickets away to others. People could share and redistribute. Non-fraternity members again. Also, chapter funds paying for drink tickets is a no.
That's a big one. Okay, so yes, those are the big ones. There are drink tickets, using chapter funds. There's alcohol. There are chapter funds. There are non-fraternity members coming to the event afterwards. So think about that. It's like non-fraternity people coming in, it's still your event. You can't say, oh, we stopped the fraternity part, but we're still right here and it's not a fraternity event anymore. It's still a fraternity event. It will continue to be a fraternity event until everyone is home and safe. Okay, so those issues popped up. So then since you've identified the risk, let's use the risk assessment tool and rate the risks on a scale of impact and likelihood. So if something bad happened at this event, say, somebody's boyfriend and his buddies came after the event, they're really good guys, they just were a little overserved and they want to, have some fun, and something bad happened. Maybe, again, let's use that, I hate saying the car crash, but maybe they get into an accident on the way home and someone is hurt. Okay, so let's rate the likelihood of all of these, the impact of that first. If something bad happens, they heard this, then in the media, it's a Greek organization throws this big party, there wasn't a guest list, all these people came, something bad happened and it made the national news. What would be the impact to the planners and organizers of the event and the chapter? Pretty high impact?
5.
Yeah, definitely a 5. It would be bad. What's the likelihood, if it's kind of a free-for-all, what's the likelihood that something bad could happen, especially off campus, it's not even controlled. The likelihood, I'd say, is also high. So you're in that red zone. Okay, let's bring this down. Let's bring this down to a green. How can we bring this down to a green? What would be the first thing we could do? Let's talk about the drink tickets and the chapter funds.
Someone said keep it on campus instead. Do only fraternity members from Katie, and then got 2 different Morgans on here, but so Morgan Martinson said no drink tickets and only sisters.
There you go. Yeah, those are fantastic ways to mitigate the risk. You can still have a great event. The other thing you can do, and this is very encouraged, if you want to have non-members attend, you have a guest list, and you only invite the people on the list, and you take their names, and they are the guest of a sister. So that sister is now responsible for her guest. If you have a guest list and you have their names and they are there from the beginning to end, they have to sign a waiver that they will follow the same policies that a member would be held accountable for, so that they know in advance. It's like this, you know, if you're underage, there's no drinking and things like that. There's a way to mitigate that. Another thing that you can do to mitigate risk, if you think that people might find a way to drink anyway because you're off campus, you know, even if you don't have the drink tickets, even if no alcohol is served, chances are if you're off campus, somebody's gonna either pregame or find a way to get a drink, especially if they're 21. So what is another way something else you might be able to do for an off-campus event, regardless of whether you've provided the alcohol or not, to make sure people are safe? Let me give you a hint. There's public transportation or even private transportation. Get everybody there together, load everybody up, and get them home safely. Okay, so really great way. That way that you know that everybody is safe. You know that they've had a great time. You get them there together. You bring them home together, and everybody is safer. So I want you to just the purpose of these scenarios, and I hope that they're somewhat relatable for different events that you might do on your campuses. But the purpose is to really make you think, rather than us saying you can't have alcohol and you can't do this. We do have a policy you need to know and you need to apply. But I really want you to become critical thinkers about where risk and exposure is for you and the members of your chapter. Okay, I'm going to flip past the third scenario to a litmus test. Okay, so it's a quick litmus test about your events and what you do. Okay, ask yourself this question: is the project, activity, event, or individual behavior something that I'm proud of? Would I tell my parents about it? Would I tell my advisor? Would I tell my school administration? Would I advertise it as, wow, this is something really cool that our chapter did? Am I proud of this? Would my future employers look at it as a positive? If you answer no to that, then maybe it's not something you should be doing. Here's another part of the litmus test. If it was captured on a video, in photos, or posted to social media, like the example I gave you earlier about Friendsgiving being, it looked like a great event and it looked like they were having fun as friends. But if it was posted to social media, would it change or in some way harm the reputation of your chapter or the fraternity? If you could answer yes to that, then you need to really be thinking things through, not from the perspective of, well, I just won't put it on video. That's not the point. The point is, if it were captured, would this be something that could harm the reputation? If so, then it's probably something you want to revise, change in some way, or not do it. Okay. What to do when the unexpected happens. Okay, in every situation, there's still, no matter how much planning you do, there's still the possibility that something bad can happen. And I hate saying that. I hate being, that person, but we have to accept that in our organizations, there's always the potential for something bad to happen. So you need to know what to do first. And that means that there's someone in harm's way. If they've been injured, they've been overserved, they're in danger of any kind, you have to call 911. You have to get them help. There's no way that that should be an afterthought, or I wish I had done that. Call the help that's needed. Call 911. You then need to contact your advisors, your region supervisor, headquarters, and if necessary, call the authorities. It could be something that requires that the authorities be involved. Do not hesitate on this. You as leaders need to make that call. Delaying notification could put individuals in harm's way, and sometimes it makes it always makes it worse down the road, okay? So if you hesitate, if you do not choose to contact the proper authorities, it will make things much worse. Okay, just remember that, okay? A sample crisis management plan has been developed to aid chapters in case of an emergency. You'll be getting more information about that so that you have access to that and you can adapt it with actual names and contact information of the people you would call immediately. So when you plan an event, we would attach that crisis management plan to the event planning document that everyone would have access to. So in the event of an emergency, you know exactly who to call, what their phone numbers are, and everything immediately. That's an important piece of all of this, is your crisis management plan. Okay, finally, you need to know the consequences, okay? And this is probably the hardest thing I've had to tell LKS members and leaders over the year, is they're like, hey, I planned this great event, and I will take full responsibility for it, and my name is signed on the contract. And I always say, you don't want to do that, okay? You want to make sure that when you plan an event, you work on it together with applying all of your available resources from the campus, from your national organization, from your advisors. Really incorporate all of their input, make decisions together, and then when you sign off on something, when you sign off on the event plan, understand that if you plan something knowing that there is risk involved, it can come back and it can affect you personally. Chapter leaders can be held personally accountable. Advisors for the fraternity, the chapter, there's so many different exposures that I don't want you to be exposed to having something come back and really change your life in a difficult way. Okay, there is something that just hit the news on, let's see, it was on Wednesday. And it's a update on Collins Law. Collins Law, hold on. Sorry about this. Okay. So Collins Law is proposing in the state of Ohio that hazing would be considered a felony. Up till now, it has not been, but now it's being proposed, and it looks like the law will go through, that hazing in any form or fashion would be considered a felony. That means any of the chapter leaders, any of the involved members could be charged with a felony for anything hazing related. So you need to, there's a case, I just read it this morning. I left the link here. I'll make sure it's available on the website. So it's just one of those things that hopefully, not to be doom and gloom, but just to be aware that this isn't a topic of you can't do what you want to do. It's just a let's plan great events that are engaging for our members, that keep them safe, and that are in the context of who we are as an organization, as Lambda Kappa Sigma. And then you can know that everything you plan moving forward is going to only enrich the legacy and the wonderful reputation of this organization that's been around for over 100 years. Okay, I've talked a lot to you. You have been such, you've been so quiet, but it's been wonderful to have you all, and thank you for attending this. The slides will be available on the LKS website along with some other additional resources. And I'm always available too if you have any questions or you want to walk through some of those scenarios and just kind of consider the risk assessment tool. I think it's something you can apply not only in LKS, but in other things that you do. So Justine, I'm going to turn it back over to you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks, Joan. Appreciate it. I think everyone's very thankful in the chat. If you guys have any questions, you're of course, able to ask those now. We will send this information out, back out to the same email that got the Zoom links. Doesn't look like anybody has any questions at the moment. But obviously this is a really important topic, and we never know kind of what may come up. And of course, maybe this isn't as applicable for some things right now because we are not having as many events. However, it's definitely something to keep in mind going forward, and just with event planning in the age of COVID is kind of a different scenario as well.
Hopefully they'll come back soon. I'm ready.
Perfect. All right. Well, I don't see any questions, Joan.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for spending your Saturday with us. I just can't appreciate you more for putting this kind of time into making sure that your LKS experience for you and for your members is so good. So thank you for spending that time.
So we do have one question. Amy wanted to know, with COVID, if we were to have an event and somebody comes down with COVID, would we be held responsible?
That's a really great question, and I'm going to send you back to those policies that I want you to reflect on. Find out what the school's policy is. The fraternity's policy has already been that if there is an order in place, that the fraternity's policy would back that completely. So if there's an order in place of distancing or whatever the guidelines are, that's now the fraternity's policy as well. So you need to make sure that you know what the rules are, what orders are currently in place, and make sure that your event falls within the context of that. If then you have an event and you've followed all of the rules and you can demonstrate social distancing, that you've followed each and every one of the rules set forth in the policy, you probably would not be held responsible for that. But remember, your Greek affiliation will always make the appearance of that. Will be like, oh, those fraternity people are having a party again and not paying attention to the rules. You'll need to be able to demonstrate every single thing you did to make sure that you followed the rules, so that if it came into question, you would be able to support that.
And I will add to that, in addition, there have been questions about that or issues that have been brought up. You also have to be very cautious, like previously discussed, about photos. So just because your photo is over, or I'm sorry, your event is over, or the people that are involved may already live together, masks need to continue to be worn in all photos. You can't just take it off really quickly and take a photo, post that to social media. It will look not good for the fraternity. So be just aware of that, and again, continue to follow anything that school says, especially about size, location, gathering. If, like Robin says, if you're wearing your letters even when you're not actually wearing your letters, so you post that to social media, whether that's your personal or you're not, you're always it's always reflecting on the fraternity as a chapter, as well as a national organization too. Thanks, Robin.
Get it better, yes.
Cool. Thanks for the question, Amy. That's a great question. All right. Thanks so much, Joan. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Cool. Take care, everyone. Enjoy your weekend.